All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to From Christal XO. I had the opportunity to talk this morning on Good Day Atlanta a little bit about Netflix's new docuseries, Sean Combs' The Reckoning. We've all known this was coming for over a year. Actually, 50 Cent announced that he was doing this before, actually right after Diddy was arrested. So right around a year. And he followed through on his word. That's one thing that we have grown to know about 50 Cent is he usually keeps his word. And so this docuseries, this 4-part docuseries, came out last night, well, actually early this morning on Netflix. And so I just wanted to jump on and talk a little bit about it because it was, in my opinion, I agree with Where's the Juice. It was well produced. And first of all, I want to say that it was not what a lot of people were expecting. A lot of people were expecting this to be like a very obvious witch hunt against Diddy, fueled by 50 Cent's hatred for him because of them sharing a woman in common. Allegedly 50 Cent's child's mother, Daphne Joy, was involved with Diddy, and a lot of people felt like that was his motivation and that was going to be a big part of this. And I would say, first of all, if you haven't watched it, then you would not know that 50 Cent is not involved. He's not even interviewed at all in this. He's not mentioned at all. If he hadn't have been telling us, weekly that he was doing this, we wouldn't even know that he was involved, except for the executive producer credit he's missing, which I think works to the credibility of the piece. Also, I don't think that it was, to me, it was not biased. I mean, I know that's probably hard to imagine, but a lot of the information that is in this piece, we've seen pieces of it before. One of the things that's very heavily discussed is the Tupac and Biggie tragedy that happened in the East Coast, West Coast beef. That is revisited, but I would say, as someone that's watched countless documentaries and reports on that, this one was a little different, and it definitely did change my opinion on some of that and how some of that played out. That was interesting because, like I said, I've been, that was during the time of my life I was very, 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 very big fan of both sides, and so hearing this information was a little different than it has been in times past. Also, I had never heard from Kirk Burroughs, who was part of he actually co-founded Bad Boy with Diddy. I did not realize that he had someone there. I mean, I figured that, there's always people in the background, always. And it's also not unlike people to fall out with partners. I mean, we know that Dame Dash, and Jay-Z and Biggs Burke were all a part of Rockefeller. They disbanded. I mean, that's not abnormal for people to start out one way with partners and business partners, and things go a very different way. I know the guys from FUBU, kind of switched up and kind of went their own way. So that wasn't the problem. I think it was his account of the way things happened that was a little troubling. And just seeing, I mean, he obviously, was there. He was accounted for in photos and memorabilia. So he's definitely like a silent contributor that was a part of that entire rise from Uptown. And when Puff went to, intern at Uptown Records with Andre Harrell, this gentleman, Kirk Burroughs, was around, and they actually were able to take Biggie with them. I did not know that Biggie was signed to Uptown. I'm sure my co-host on here for Dating Diaries, and the recap probably knew that Biggie was actually signed to Uptown. Andre Harrell allowed him to go. There's footage with Andre Harrell. We know that he's passed on. But probably the biggest shocker in this series is that you get a chance to actually see Diddy preparing his defense. You know, he's frustrated. He's, just scattered. He's desperate, and he's trying to keep his cool on camera, but you can tell that he's falling apart. There's some strange stories, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but I do want to talk a little bit about what we saw from him. I think that it just reaffirmed my belief that he's probably one of the best marketers in the world. He knows how to connect with people. We did get a chance to hear from 2 jury members, and I'm convinced, this is just my opinion here, that he was able to charm the jury. He was able to charm the media. And I think that he understands, he's one of the few people that really understood and has always understood the power of media. One of the few celebrities that has a firm grasp on how powerful the media is. We see him saying that early on. We also see all the different cases that he was involved in and managed to evade, you know, from the very first time that he kind of got into trouble with the situation with the concert that he promoted, where 9 people lost their lives because of the party not being, the basketball game, celebrity basketball game not being appropriately staffed, and there not being a actual flow of traffic. They actually oversold the event, and he was able to kind of escape without blemish from that. It did work to, make him more popular, and his ascent continued. They also talked about, went back and touched briefly on the situation with Shine and Jennifer Lopez, and him dating her at the time that happened, and that there were people witnesses that did testify that they saw him shoot a gun that was not, for whatever reason, he was not charged. He was able to leave scot-free again. Later, the situation with Biggie and Tupac, I can't remember if that was before or after the Shine situation. The Biggie and Tupac situation, there was a lot of testimony around him basically, putting a hit out on Tupac and Suge. That is actually a big part of this docuseries. And I would say, for someone that paid attention to that, this did really change my opinion on some of that. So that's a big part of it as well. I think Eric Sermon from EPMD is probably one of the only celebrities besides like Kalina Harper from Dirty Money speaks and gives her story, which is interesting. I'll explain why in a minute. But Eric Sermon talks a lot about their relationship and just the perception of Diddy, and the fact that he was someone that did go after. He confirms that, which we've seen in some of the other documentaries, that he did go after people's girls. We know that he was that Albie Shore initially was dating Kim Porter. Albie Shore was at Uptown. He sees Kim Porter and decides that he wants to, take his girl, and he did. And the same thing with Eric Sermon. What's a little strange with that Eric Sermon story is that he alleges that he and Misa were only friends, but that Diddy saw Misa with him and he had to have her, and he got to her. Chrissy says that Eric was the only celebrity. I think that Dawn and not Dawn, but Kalina and Aubrey O'Day were members of, his Making the Band MTV camp. And so I would say that they would be considered celebrities in addition to Eric Sermon, but they're definitely not at the level of him. But Kalina was in Dirty Money with him. I actually worked with her. So I did know, I know her, fairly well from working with her for a stint of time. And I did know that she was very, she was honored and extremely excited to be a part of Dirty Money, as anybody would be. But she talks about the fact that she does not confirm what Don said, but we do see a very pivotal moment that was talked about, and it kind of explains, in my opinion, why the judge did not allow him bail. So in the videos, we're able to see him. This was 5 to 6 days before he's arrested, and he's calling Kalina. He calls Kalina. He tells her that he just learned that Don has a lawsuit out against him, and he's asking her for a big brother favor and putting a lot of pressure. You can hear it. He's doing this in front of his camera because, of course, initially this was supposed to be filmed for him. He probably thought he was going to get off and this was going to be a part of the glory reel. But he asked Kalina for a brother favor and asked her to make a statement, to do an interview, to do something to recount, or at least, basically make Don's allegations seem like they're not true. And Kalina agrees. But she does share that she was in a bad place financially. She was struggling at the time, and she had reached out to him and asked him for $5,000, to which he was able to do it. So it's like she's supporting him, but you can tell she feels some kind of way about the fact that he was definitely not there for her. And now he's reaching out to her, asking her for a brother favor. And he says on the phone call that he knows that she loves him. And I definitely know that, I think that you can tell that she's still a fan, still loves him, even though I think she was disappointed in how he treated her. Eric Sermon talks a lot, and he recounts this story that is a little strange, but this is his testimony. This is his story. He says that Puff was very jealous of the relationship he had with Misa. There was an incident where Misa was in his truck, and Puff found her, knocks on the window, and he's very upset. And Eric alleges that Puff swung on him, like tried to start a fight with him physically. And he said he didn't really, see him like that. He was like, I'm not thinking he's really trying to fight me. So he says, let's go around the corner. Puff gets in the car with him, and they go around the corner allegedly to fight. But then he ends up letting him hear a song. So that was a little strange, and the fact that he didn't say they actually dated. But he said that Puff was jealous of that relationship and had to have Misa. Talk a little bit about Kim Porter, not too much about Kim Porter, but there's more about Misa. As most of you guys know, if you keep up with him, Misa is the mother of his first child, Justin. And so Kirk Burroughs, who was the co-founder with him at Bad Boy, he alleges that he saw Puff be physically violent with Misa. That's his testimony, and he shares that in this docuseries. That's a little unsettling in the way he talks about it. There is, in addition to seeing Puff get ready for this arrest and try to go around the city of New York, which he has not been in for years, and he's bicycling, he's wanting to be seen. He's purposely taking pictures with everyone that asks for a picture. He's trying to stack the court of public opinion in his favor. And I mean, honestly, for the people on the street that are there, that are taking pictures with him, they seem very excited, even though all these allegations are swirling around. You see people, breaking their neck to get a picture with him. And I think that's just how celebrity works. So that's interesting to see that he's still thinking that, court matters, but also he understands the power of the court of public opinion, in addition to the law. Sometimes those lines can be blurred. So you see this footage, throughout the series. You see him bicycling, you see him in a hotel room or in a penthouse suite trying to figure out, what can we do? Kind of going off on his lawyers, telling them that we're losing. We've got to figure this out. We need to find PR people that are really good at what they do and that are used to dealing with the dirtiest of the dirty. and know how to, spin things. And to our understanding, that's what he was able to do when it came to the court. The court hearing, there are people, that's a couple of bloggers that testify that his PR team would basically kind of court um, there. I know that they were sharing information. And I know several bloggers, I will not share names, that did get the curated talking points from his team and did share them. Um, it even seemed to me that the jury was really charmed, by him. He's really good at being able to, make people feel inspired and feel like they're part of something bigger. And I think that ability followed him and continues to follow him probably up throughout this even. And I think even when he gets out, because he will be out by 2028, which is not a really long time. And I suspect after watching this, he's just, I see him being able to come back and rebound. You guys can let me know what you think, if you agree. Some of the other disturbing pieces of information, one of the things I mentioned on Fox this morning was that Kirk Burroughs exposes him as this mass manipulator. He basically shares that he had 25% of the company initially when they got the check from Clive Davis to start Bad Boy. He brought him in and he had his mother. He put the company in his mother's name because he did not want to have to pay any of the families that were suing him, that had been involved in the tragedy at that celebrity basketball game. And he also probably had the foresight to know there were things that could come up that he could be sued for. And so 75%, this is according to Kurt, 75% was in his mother's name, and Kurt was 25% shareholder. And he was that way for a really long time. And then finally, when they got to another level, Diddy basically bullied him out of his 25%, made him sign away his holdings in the company. Except he alleges that Diddy physically threatened him, and he, signed over his right, but that he stayed as an employee of the organization for some years after that. He shares a lot, and it's really a sad story. This man that was a part of Bad Boy, that he said Puff gave him like $1 million when they signed. They got a certain amount. I can't remember how much it was, like maybe $10 million. Puff took 1.5 for himself and gave him $1 million and told him to do whatever he wanted, but make sure the company did not fail. And so he kept the books for the company and basically did everything, the paperwork and the structure. One of the directors for Alexandra Stapleton, who was one of the directors with 50 Cent on this, said that the journals, the books that Kirk Burroughs had were very instrumental in this documentary, because they were able to go back and read. He had handwritten stuff back in the day when people were handwriting everything out that happened, just chronicling and keeping up with the payments. So his story did check out. One thing that I do believe about this docuseries is that he definitely, Netflix and 50 Cent's team definitely did their due diligence, and anything that was stated as far as facts that Kurt was sharing were fact checked. There's no way to fact check Eric Sermon's story. But as far as the different things that were happening, the successes that were happening with Bad Boy, all of that is chronicled in this docuseries. And it's still very, aspirational, quite honestly. I mean, the fact that he was able to create this empire, just based on, hard work ethic and refusing to fail and wanting to live outside the box and being extremely ambitious, it's still very, it's aspirational, in my opinion, even though it definitely, there's definitely issues. I think you can see a change when you hear people talking about him. You can see a change when they got to a certain level of success. His former assistant, Capricorn, speaks about him. Now, her story, again, it seems very outrageous, almost like Eric's sermon. She said that, she was around when Cassie comes into play. At this point, things are starting to be a little bit different, starting to be a little weird. He's now doing drugs. Initially, Kurt said he was not a person that would drink or do drugs. He goes through a situation and hurts his wrist. He and Kim allegedly have a fight, and he hurts his wrist, and he starts taking Percocets, and then from then on, people are recounting him using drugs. And at this point, things start to kind of change and how he's treating people. Even his conversation, if you see, there's an interview, I believe it was a BET interview that's very eerie. And he's talking about Biggie and saying that, Biggie was one of the few people that he trusted because he doesn't trust most people. He doesn't have very many friends, even though people assume that he does have a lot of friends. He said he does not. And he also said he doesn't think that he's a very good friend. It was kind of telling, because later in the docuseries, when they're talking about Biggie's death, there are several things. Number one, there are people alleging that Biggie did not want to stay in LA, that he wasn't even really excited about going to LA. Puff wanted him to stay because he wanted to throw a party there to kind of, show the guys on the West Coast that they weren't scared and that they could come to their territory. There are, for lack of a better word, gang members saying that, they advised him against throwing a party in LA. He did not listen. And so it really kind of seems like he put Big in a bad position himself as well. But really, because Biggie is, we ended up losing him at that point. So afterwards, hearing Kurt suggest that after Biggie passed, Puff said, we're going to throw this big funeral. I'm going to pay for everything. I'm going to, he's going to get a king's funeral. And then hearing that Puff actually didn't pay for it. He actually took it out of Biggie's earnings, and the family actually ended up recouping that. I think most people that were around then remember that there was a disconnect between Puff and Big's mother at some point. Initially, she was, he was honoring her and everything. And then it became a disconnect where you could tell she was not in agreement with him and felt like he was taking advantage of the situation. And they separated, and they don't. And she didn't, she's never supported him, moving forward. But that bit of information, I think, is going to shock people, hearing that he did not pay for the funeral. Also seeing the way he positioned himself. He suggests that Puff turned down a source, I think it was a Rolling Stone cover for Big, and said that it needed to go to him instead. There's just, some things that kind of throw a little bit of salt on that friendship, and, not anything that people haven't probably speculated, but just additional confirmation about that. They, like I said, initially, they go a lot into this Biggie Tupac situation. And even when Tupac was shot at the studio, he was going there and meeting with with bad boy artists. Hearing Lil C say that he was in the elevator and was told to go back in, and then, Tupac was shot. It just, the way it's shared, Keefe D's testimony, and then other, there's another member of the Crips that Puff was close to, that says that basically Puff at one point did put a bounty, on Tupac and Suge Knight's head of $1 million in front of a room of gang members, and that was common knowledge at that time and was out. So it did kind of make me go back and think, because I've been one that's not really a conspiracy theorist. And so when I would hear people, say that about him, I just thought that just seemed far-fetched. But hearing these people that were there and that were, understand this world to, co-sign that is kind of strange. There was another man that Zip, another gang member that Puff was close to, that was allegedly involved in this, and he's passed on. A lot of the people that were involved obviously have passed on by now, but Kurt basically confirmed all of that along with Keefe D. So that was unsettling, and I think people kind of have known that there was more to that than we would ever be able to prove, and probably will never be able to prove. That is, like I said, probably a fourth of the entire series kind of focuses on that issue and kind of paints this possibility of Puff being the puppet master behind all of that East Coast, West Coast beef. And it's really kind of suggested that his issue came from a strong jealousy of Tupac and the fact that Tupac and Biggie were friends. Yeah, where's it you said that? I just literally was saying it when I saw your comment there, that his jealousy of Tupac because of their initial friendship, and every, people that were around in that time remember that they, at one point, there was a friendship, and there was Biggie actually would open up for Tupac, and there was a sense of respect, between them. And then all of a sudden things shifted, and in this docuseries it suggested that was because of Diddy's jealousy of Tupac. And it just keeps going and going and going. And even though he's positioning himself as the peacemaker, when Suge goes up to the microphone and says, if you don't want to see someone dancing in the videos, if you don't want a producer that's dancing in the videos and charging you for that, then come to death row. And then Puff goes up and says, oh, I want to congratulate everybody. But secretly he's, behind the scenes, doing something else, but he just wants to appear. It really makes him to be a mastermind of public perception and manipulation throughout the entire docuseries, from the shooting with Shine in the club and saying that he doesn't have a gun and making himself into, a victim, to, the situation with Biggie and Pac. And even this situation, you see him trying to, figure out a way to get out of it. Cassie is introduced, and it's clear that the relationship is very different than the one he's had with Kim Porter. They even have some of one of the gentlemen that was known to be their partner in the freak offs. That's another thing I think people are going to be surprised with. It doesn't really focus on the freak offs at all. That's not it. It really doesn't go deep down that dark path, and probably a lot of people assumed it would, because there was a lot of salacious tidbits that were shared during the trial that this is totally devoid of. You don't hear any of that in this. You do hear about their Cassie and Puff using drugs and doing these wild 2 to 3 day, 4 days, sexual instances, but it doesn't go deep like it did, like in the trial when we were hearing these little pieces back to back to back. You don't hear any of that. Cassie, you do see the tape. That's one of the things I did not like about it. The only thing I think I did not like about it was constantly seeing that video. I mean, if it wasn't ingrained in your brain after watching this, it definitely, would be ingrained in your brain. It was hard to watch. And so I just didn't, it's just too much. Like, it's, seeing that is horrible. Jay-Z wasn't mentioned. No other celebrities really were mentioned. You saw a couple of slides with like Leonardo DiCaprio and him. Like, it was clear that he was at the top of his game, and that very few people have ever made it to that extent of just fame and privilege. But you didn't see anything with any other celebrities. It's very clean as far as that's concerned. It really just kind of focuses on him and his story, his rise to fame. It talks about how he got into it with Steve Stout over Do They Hate Me Now, the video where he put himself on a cross. It really focuses on his run-ins with the law, and him kind of being above the law. One of the things I thought was interesting is there are two jurors, a man who's appears to be like an Indian man, or and a Black female, and they both seem rather, I would say, charmed almost by him. One of the things that bothered me the most in this docuseries is the man refers to Diddy and Cassie's relationship as a couple that was really in love. And that was troubling to hear. I mean, but that also explains, how the jury came back with this verdict. It's very troubling to hear. Aubrey O'Day from Danity Kane is in the docuseries. She speaks about her time with Danity Kane, and she alleges some things, but never really explains what he did to her to make her so upset. Besides just being extremely just condescending, and with stuff that we all saw if you watched Making the Band, you saw him be really hard on her, and they had a weird relationship. But she tells a story about a woman that came up to her and told her that she witnessed Puff sexually assaulting her, Aubrey, and Puff and another man. And so Aubrey doesn't remember this, which I don't think it really should have been allowed into the docuseries, because she doesn't remember it. Someone told her they witnessed it. She doesn't have a reference of time or anything. It just felt like a little bit of a reach. Actually, not even a little bit. Pretty big reach. But this was someone else's story that they shared. And I do want to say, just as a prerequisite for myself on this channel, one of the things that I don't like about things like this is that it does make it difficult on victims, because hearing this man say that he felt like this was two people that love each other, but that just couldn't get it together. After seeing that video and hearing Cassie's testimony, it seems like her testimony was one of the biggest pieces of public. The public really assigned him guilt because of that, but then the jury actually, that relationship was probably one of the reasons he got off, hearing about it, because so many people feel like if you kept going back, then it couldn't have been that bad. And it's unfortunate because a lot of victims have that Stockholm syndrome and do go back to situations that are not safe. But hearing, this man on the jury say that this was a couple that was in love. Even the young lady that was involved, she seems to be a fan. She says she wasn't a huge fan, but the way she speaks about him and just her recollection of things, it does seem like someone that was affected by the level of celebrity of the person that they were, having to review information on. So I do think the man's comment was more alarming, but even her perception and the way she recollects the trial, it's hard. It's easy to see why someone would feel like they could not go to the police or could not, however you handle, situations like that. This case is definitely one that will not help with victims, because, victims were not believed. Capricorn shares that he threatened to kill her when she first started working for him, but because she took the job and continued working, it kind of made her seem not credible. She also speaks about a time where Cassie acknowledged that she was seeing Kid Cudi, and then Diddy tells her, "Let's go, we're going to kill him." She admits that on the stand, or acknowledges that, and the jury didn't believe her. That was one of the situations that the young lady said seemed totally unbelievable. She said that just didn't, she said that because they asked her, this was an interesting piece. They asked her, the producers asked this juror, what was her thoughts of Diddy, and she said he seemed very down to earth, and there were certain times that a witness would say something so outrageous that he would roll his eyes and kind of look at them, and she would agree, what she heard was ridiculous. She would agree with him, and they asked her for an example of something that happened that was said in court that he responded to, that she felt that she agreed with him. And she said when his former assistant Capricorn mentioned going to kill Kid Cudi. Now, if you guys know the story, his car was set on fire. but I guess that was not, um, the evidence was, there was not enough evidence for them. And according to this juror, that seemed just out of, that just seemed impossible or not plausible, right? So that was interesting because I think a lot of people, myself included, wondered how did we get to this, verdict where he's only, you know, convicted on 2 counts, and those are the lesser charges. Um, but hearing that, he and Cassie were in a loving relationship, they just couldn't make things work. Not that he was, abusing someone that there was no mention of her family being extorted. Like the jurors didn't, their what they took away was that, this was two people, there was a misunderstanding, but there was not really a lot of criminal activity. And that was strange, but it also proves that if you are a victim of a wealthy person with a lot of influence, that's why victims don't come forward, right? Lastly, there was testimony that I did find a little strange and hard to believe, and that was um, Little Rob, or little yeah, this producer that worked on the Love album with him. Um, he became like the golden boy. He was using a lot of his production for the entire album. The young man was not paid, but at first he was getting a lot of perks, like you're staying with him and you're hanging out and you're being around. And he's giving you a nickname, and you know, um, you get to be part of cool kids, for this time period. So he continues doing that. They do this for around 2.5 years to working on this album. It's obvious that Diddy is not his former self where he could just knock things out. He's having a hard time, getting himself together in the booth and actually finishing up this album. The young man he tells a story that doesn't seem, it seems a little far-fetched that he saw someone, he heard two gunshots and went in the bathroom, and Diddy and his son were exiting, and there was a guy in there bleeding out, called an ambulance. The person disappears. It doesn't have the person's name. I don't know if that should have been included in the docuseries because there's no proof that happened. He also accuses Diddy of SA, but he doesn't go into detail and doesn't really explain it. So I don't know. For me, I'm just like, as a journalist, I don't think that should have been added to the documentary because you're not willing to really talk about it. So you can't just put something out there and not back it up. Right. And so it did seem a bit far-fetched. But some of the other testimonies, it's interesting to see what they chose, but they did, a lot of people that got on the stand, the jury just did not believe them, and that could be because they weren't believable, or it also could be because this is someone that people have, grown up with and looked and kind of, idolized to some extent, and how they see him and what he's been able to accomplish. I mean, they showed him getting this Lifetime Achievement Award from, BET, and being heralded, as this cultural icon. So it is difficult to watch people like that. It's hard to see them in a different light. So, but that was clear, from the jurors that were there. There were just two, and but very different, but had similar recounts of what happened. So overall, I think it was a great docuseries. I think it was edited really well. It's definitely interesting. I think that people will enjoy it. I don't necessarily think that it's going to change people's perception of him. I think people that thought he was guilty probably still will, and I think people that think he's innocent probably still will. But it was really a good piece, I think, just as far as docuseries go. And then I think being able to see someone, especially someone like Puff that has this reputation of being, untouchable and above, reproach, being able to see him kind of lose it, in the days leading up to that arrest, was definitely a shocker, because we've seen him be very stoic throughout this time. We saw him after the arrest, you know, being remitted and not being able to get bail, but hearing how he was reaching out to people and calling people. I believe that he called Kalina 16 times. Does explain why the judge felt like he was a risk. They said that he was reaching out to people, texting them, I mean, and calling them and telling them he wasn't supposed to be talking to them, but wanted to, kind of make sure that they were on the same page as him. So that explains why he ended up not being able to be granted bail, because really, if you look at what he ended up being convicted on, he should have been able to get bail. But I think it was his actions that prohibited him from that. Even talking to his lawyers is interesting, because he's not talking about anything other than what he can convince people. Like, he's never dealing with facts. He's dealing with perception. And I think that's something for me that's just interesting as a person that's been in publicity, to see that it's not, I always would tell clients, it's not really about the truth, it's really about what you can prove and how people feel about you. And I think this docuseries proves it. I think people are going to actually give 50 a little bit of a pass when they see this. But I think people really felt like that this was going to be him basically just dogging out Diddy, and it's not that at all. I don't know how involved he was in the selection process and the interviews, but it feels like he was a person involved financially and probably, lending his name to the project. But it actually is a really solid piece, and it doesn't feel like revenge or a vendetta. It could be, but it doesn't read that way. And it just kind of is informative. It's part of history. I mean, Diddy is definitely a part of hip hop history, not even hip hop, pop culture history. And so that's what it does. So I would give it a 9 out of 10, honestly. I would give it the actual docuseries, how it's put together, and compared to other docuseries, I would give it a 9 out of 10. I said I didn't appreciate constantly seeing that visual, but I also know that my preference is probably different than the public. And it bothered me to hear jury members refer to a domestic violence laden relationship as a relationship with two people that love each other. That just proves that we have a long way to go in fighting for women's rights, and just for victims' rights, not even women, just victims' rights, and how people view domestic violence is still very troubling. And it should answer. A lot of people will say, why? I heard Charlemagne the God this morning asking, with as far as his former partner, why would he not say anything until now? Like, why did the people stay quiet, until now? Why Don? A lot of people didn't understand why Don from Dirty Money stayed quiet. Why is Kirk finally coming out? Now, before I get out of here, I got to let you guys know, Kirk Burroughs, who was his former partner, who had him, was given $1 million allegedly by Diddy, ended up homeless and, blackballed in the industry. It's just really sad, what happened to him after Diddy took his shares, and then because he wouldn't do something with the situation with Biggie, he ended up he wanted to change the agreement, according to Kurt, in the paperwork, so that he would go in and change some of the paperwork in the contract, but had the signature already signed, because Biggie was passed on. And when he didn't do that, he suggests that he was fired shortly after. But hearing how that man's life was destroyed after all the work, he was very loyal to him through a lot of things, seeing things and looking the other way, and supporting him through a lot of dysfunction. And he ended up homeless and probably unable to move forward. His assistant, Capricorn, talks about, just reliving all that time. People assume that because someone didn't speak out then, they're lying. And I think that's unfair, because look what happens when people do speak out. People just attack their character or try to figure out ways that make their story, poke holes in their story. And so, yes, I do believe that we do need to do our due diligence when it comes to victims. But I think this case where you see and you hear from numerous sources that someone was abused physically and emotionally, mentally, and people don't define it that way. I think that says a lot about our culture and the relationship to fame and the relationship to celebrity. So that is my take. I give it a 9 out of 10. I think that 50 Cent and his team did a great job, specifically, oh my goodness, Alexandra Stapleton, that's went actually on Good Morning America with 50 to talk about this. I actually wish that 50 would not have even went on there. I wish, because I think that's going to color people. Dame Dash, not that anyone's listening to Dame, as we talked about last night, but Dame Dash said that, one black man shouldn't be tearing another one down, and he kind of discredited 50. I do think that 50 being pushing it and being, such a huge vocal advocate probably takes some credibility away from the fact that it's really a solid piece. And I hope people actually will watch it with an open mind and, going from there. I do believe that Diddy will be out probably sooner than 2028, his deadline. But even if he does serve all the time that he's due, I definitely see him making a comeback. There are a lot of people that were in support of him. There are a lot of people that are still in support of him. And I think that, there's a line, there's a couple of lines that are kind of eerie, where he says that, nothing can break him. This is right before he's preparing for the arrest. He also compares himself to Jesus Christ. Several times he said that he can't compare himself to another mere man. That was a little unsettling. You can see that he felt like he was above reproach because of him being able to get away with so many different things over time. So there's definitely some cause for pause, in this piece. But overall, it is, it's a fairly well produced documentary on one of the biggest cultural, icons of our time. So I'm sure it will continue to do well. And I don't think the story is over. I think the story is going to pick up when he returns, and we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. If you watched it, if you're going to watch it, please leave a review. I feel like my voice was super monotone the whole time, so I apologize for that, and not having clips, but I really just wanted to get in and kind of give you my take on it and point out some of the things that I thought were disturbing, some of the things that I thought were done well. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Tomorrow, Dating Diaries with Scorpio and One Eye. See you guys tomorrow at 8. Bye-bye.